Yeah, gotta aim for the top like, hold up. Yeah, I can never doubt myself, I know better. All of you critics be acting like you know better. Blowing the smoke, but I know when the dust settles that I'm in my element. It's evident that there's levels to the game.
What's happening, people? Happy New Year and welcome back to the Athletes to Athletes podcast. This is the first show of 2025, and I'm happy to be back with my man Reed, co-founder of A2A. I am your host, Ryan Holmes, and today we're going to jump into a new college, I guess. Is it another legislation? And I think that this is like a lot of things that are coming down is a lot of legislation when it comes to college, and specifically college football, right? College football, we're in the heart of championship season. We're recording this after what the semifinals. Last night we had Notre Dame, Penn State. So today we've got Ohio State and Texas when this is being recorded. Um, so we'll certainly see. Reed as a UT alum, I'm sure he wants to see the Burnt Orange do very well tonight. But when it comes to today's topic, we're talking about how junior college athletes are essentially no longer going to be penalized for going the junior college route before starting in the NCAA. And hopefully I'm paraphrasing that correctly as I've, read through, your blog post on the site, which everybody should go read, which will be linked in the summary here on this video. But also doing a little bit more digging into this and seeing what coaches' thoughts were. I mean, we've talked about Texas. Coach Sark had some words about the ruling essentially with the quarterback from Vanderbilt, who was kind of the poster child for this. But man, it's another NCAA level legislation or ruling that mostly affects football, but will certainly start to trickle down to other sports. And, as we've said, a number of times on here, I cover college wrestling, and we've had a number of college wrestlers that have gone that junior college route that have then transferred into Division 1, Division 2, Division 3. A couple of guys that have gotten that nod to be Division 1 wrestlers after kind of getting their grades together, essentially going JuCo. But when I heard about the Pavia ruling, Pavia being the Diego Pavia being the Vanderbilt quarterback, um, I was skeptical to be too judgmental, right? Because you have guys that aren't getting a chance, right? You're my thought on it, and let me back up a little bit. My thought on it was, okay, maybe that is a good thing, right? But then as you dig a little bit deeper and what everybody is currently worried about is how many years do these guys get? Right. We just saw a University of Miami tight end who had 8 or 9 years in the NCAA. And if you look at his entire resume, it's, redshirt freshman year, season ending injury, another year played, season ending injury. Like it was just, the man should have been in a body cast instead of in a helmet and shoulder pads, but he was still out on the field, right? So I think that's one of the things that people are worried about is you're going to have guys that say, well, maybe I can, with NIL, maximize my income by signing to a school and negotiating with a school that I will go to junior college to develop, which happens. My nephew went to a prep school to develop as a quarterback before transitioning to a tight end. Right now, he's actually on a recruiting trip to West Virginia, as he's looking to transfer after playing Lafayette for a couple of years. But which it does happen where the schools will say, hey, we want you to develop a little bit more. We would like to send you here so that you can learn and develop into a player that we want to come in and play a major role. But now, like I said, with NIL, what stops them from saying, okay, we're going to sign this kid to an NIL deal. where he goes to a junior college to develop. And then when our starting quarterback right now, or our starting running back, or our number one wide receiver is ready to move on to the NFL, we already have this feeder program of guys that can come in from JuCo, and they have a full 4 years that they can now use here at Florida State, here at Clemson, here at Notre Dame, right? What is stopping that from happening? That was my next thought after hearing about this ruling. And I paused and said that's probably not going to be the best thing for sports, because you are going to have guys. We already have guys that are older. We already have, fan bases that are talking about how old guys are in college, specifically in wrestling. You're not, there's no professionals. You're a college wrestler. That's kind of the epitome outside of wrestling on the world and Olympic team. But you can do this, you can do both. It's not like going off to the NFL. It's not like going off to the MLB. You don't have to say see you later to college. You're normally still in college, and some kids, as good as they are these days, are still in high school wrestling on that senior level. But in college football, it's very much so different. Where if you have these grown men that are still playing with essentially 18 to 22-year-old kids before going to the NFL, you're like, well, man, is that what we want? And I think that's where Sark was going, Coach Sarkisian was going with his statement. And, I'm paraphrasing, obviously, because I don't have the quote right in front of me, but he was talking about, now we're going to have these guys that are in college and they are 27, 28, still playing in college. And, those aren't, it's not what we want. We want to develop a kid so that he is ready for the NFL and he goes off to that next level. With this, you don't have that. You can prolong starting in college, which, as I said, people already do with a gray shirt year here and there. But now it is going to be a little bit more calculated, to the point where I believe you are going to have these junior college start working as feeder programs, where you have your, Alabama's going over to your local junior college and saying, hey, we want to bring this kid in, but we want him to maybe reclassify, or we want him to sit the bench. Instead of him sitting the bench, how about he comes and plays for you? And here's some of the things we want him to develop. Here's what we want you to work on with him. Here's his diet and exercise plan. Here's the NIL money to pay him to stay here. And then when we're ready, we will basically pluck him off of your minor league team and bring him up to the majors. That is my thought, and that is my fear of what can potentially happen. Not saying that doesn't already happen, but with NIL, it's an even bigger possibility. When you heard this case with Pavia, what were your thoughts, and what was your initial kind of light bulb moment of how good this could be or how bad this could be?
Yeah, this one's interesting to me because, and I love that you and I are getting to talk about this, and I love that it's one of the rare instances where I think we both kind of had different initial thoughts on it, which makes for a really, in my opinion, a really fun conversation. I was in the camp of, man, as soon as I saw that, like I loved it. Like I was really excited about it. And to your point, I think that, I think we thought about it from different ends of the spectrum. And before I dive into that, just really quickly, kind of a broad overview of this Diego Pavia case, just to kind of level set a little bit. So, Diego Pavia, current quarterback for Vanderbilt University, essentially proposed to a judge that because he played junior college athletics or non-NCAA athletics, that those years of his playing time should not be counted against his eligibility at the NCAA. That judge that he argued to, or that his lawyer argued to, imposed a court injunction against the NCAA for a very specific set of circumstances. Right now, the only thing that is sort of under scrutiny or is allowed is NCAA Division One athletes who competed at a non-NCAA school for more than what for one or more seasons, and who would have otherwise used their final season of competition during the 2025 academic season. Those are the players that are allowed to have an additional year of eligibility. So right now it is a microscopic, lens of people who can sort of take advantage of this. But what myself and you and a lot of other people feel is that this is sort of the pebble that starts the landslide. when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to this type of conversation, and to the point where even Charlie Baker is going on the Pat McAfee show and like arguing against it immediately, and they're already offering up a fifth year of eligibility for the NCAA to try and like curb some of that and whatnot. So I think everyone kind of sees the writing on the wall that okay, this thing went through, that's going to set precedent, and now we're going to be able to sort of roll this down the hill
Mm-hmm.
effectively. But when I first saw it, you know, to your point, I agree with all of the things that you said, and I guess maybe where my head is at is I don't necessarily, in my opinion, I would rather see that issue of eligibility and kids being in school forever. I would rather see that get fixed on the NCAA side, being more black and white about what is and isn't eligible extensions to your eligibility. Because I think that's where we get a
Completely
lot of
agree.
gray area, and we get a lot of just like there's somebody out there with like those little, you know, ghost wands trying to see kind of what makes sense or what doesn't make sense for certain people. So in my opinion, the NCAA is who needs to get a little more black and white on how those rules work. Where I see the benefit on the JuCo side of things, you know, I think about it probably more on like the 98% of kids who aren't in those autonomous four group, who aren't in those big revenue generating sports, football, men's and women's basketball, baseball to an extent sometimes. Um, for me, that you know, I look at the kids that I'm working with on a day-to-day basis. I look at the kids that are coming, you know, through that pipeline, and for so many kids nowadays, the theme I feel like for a lot of kids that are working is executive functioning. They're trying to learn how to be adults. They're trying to learn how to sort of hard land this new thing of being an adult and having these responsibilities. And you can chalk that up to, you know, these kids miss chunks of things during COVID. You can chalk it up to parenting styles. You can chalk it up to this is just what happens in generations. None of us have ever had to have the type of scrutiny that these kids have had to have on a social media
Mm-hmm.
standpoint, you know, starting at freaking 5 years old, it feels like. There's a lot of elements there that sort of play into what this looks like. But for me, I saw it as, you know, initially just a new pathway for development. It takes a lot of pressure off of a 17 or an 18-year-old kid to have to come in and say, okay, I need to make this decision on where I'm going to go to school and potentially trade, you know, a year or two of opportunity if I want to go to one of these bigger schools. Maybe I am capable of going to an LSU or a Texas or, you know, one of these, a Florida State, right? But I know I'm going to sit the bench for the first 2 years. Is that going to make me fall out of love with the sport? Am I going to struggle to, you know, find joy while I'm there because this thing that I play is the thing that's keeping me motivated to do what I want to do? And if I'm not on the field every day, whereas if I'm playing for that team, I probably was the guy on my team or
Mm-hmm.
the girl on my team. That's a really big shift for a lot of these kids to make. And so you take this thing away that they love, you put them in a more rigorous environment, you take them away from their family and structure. What does that do? And I feel like that's where you see a lot of these kids transfer out or move around or kind of retry to find their purpose a lot of times. Whereas if you could go to a junior college, save a little bit of money, have smaller classes that are a little more attentive for base classes, have playing time, you know, and then sort of graduate into that 4 year program without losing the opportunity to kind of have that full college, quote unquote, 4 year college experience. That to me is a really interesting way to look at it, I think. And that was kind of my mentality. I completely agree with you. I don't think there's any way, if this ends up expanding, there's no doubt that the Alabamas of the world, the Florida States of the world, and all that kind of stuff, they're going to have pipeline schools. It just is the case. That exists in baseball today because baseball has used and abused junior college forever. Like I could tell you right now in Texas, if you want to go to XYZ school, you go to ABC Junior College, and that's where those
Mm-hmm.
pipelines exist, right? And I think we're accustomed to seeing that on the baseball side. I think that would be a new thing to see with a lot of other sports. Um, but for me, I just the idea of kids kind of being able to kind of soft land their college experience financially, you know, emotionally, academically, athletically. I think for 98% of kids that sort of don't fall into that, you know, massive NIL draw or these massive autonomous four schools, I think for them it could be a really, really good thing. Um, Personally. So that was kind of that was where my frame of mind was whenever I looked at it and kind of where I thought from. But it's really interesting to hear your side of the coin because again, you spend a lot more time on the NIL side. You're a lot more sort of on that we'll call it the 1% or the 2% that are kind of
Mm-hmm.
operating in that space. And I do think realistically, you know, to your point and to kind of expand on that, like once again, it is going to, if this is something that expands, it's going to move the goalposts yet again for high school kids,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that happened with the transfer portal. That happened with the extra COVID year. If we were to do this, even if whether it's the NCAA 5-year rule or the JuCo rule would be my preference. You have to then move the goalposts again. So you have kids that, I'm talking to or anybody's talking to, and they see their friends from 4 years ago when they were freshmen and that person was a senior, getting into these autonomous four schools, going to Clemson to play, going to Georgia, whatever it might be. And now they look at you and you say, hey, statistically, you're probably a better player than this person, but you've got to go to Navarro Junior College for 2 years because that's the new system of how we have. And you just have to be okay with that. Like that's how we're gonna, or man, you can walk on here, you can roll the dice. We've got two guys that are in front of you. We got a transfer portal fill in. Good luck to you. And you can start your clock right now. And that's something that I think a lot of kids are going to have trouble with. I think a lot of times, especially when you can see your buddy, 2 or 3 years up the line who got to quote unquote do it that way, that's tough for them to sort of to kind of readjust their mindsets on and get comfortable with. And I think it'll take a different kind of kid who's willing to sort of add 2 years to their college experience, 1 to 2 years to their college experience in the JUCO space. And that just becomes part of that conversation, in my opinion. So, but that was where my head was at whenever I thought of this.
Yeah. From from everything that you just said, I couldn't help but have a personal thought with all of these things. And your anecdote of essentially stopping the clock or slowing the clock down for these seniors, right? Made me think about the fact that I wish I could have done that as the sports media person that I am today, right? Where I look at my high school career and I say, okay, well, there's a number of kids in today's world who were held back, who the parents wanted to slow these things down. My parents wanted to speed things up to the point where I graduated high school as a 17-year-old. So my first day at Wilkes University, I'm on campus and I can sign the papers, but I don't truly have the consent to do it. My mom has to stick around for the meeting, and it's me and I think one or two other of my teammates. The rest of the parents, they were gone, right? So my mom and dad had to stick around to sign off on all of this paperwork because I was only 17. I wasn't an adult yet. So when I look at this, I say, man, I wonder what would have transpired and how much better would I have potentially been if my clock was slowed down, if I was able to develop as an athlete, if I was able to do some of the things that you see now that are just common. And with with what you're saying, I do understand where you're coming from. And I honestly love that outlook where a kid should have a chance to develop. A kid, however, I also see it as the what you mentioned generationally, how things are different from generation to generation. Whereas I said it was, hey, Ryan, you're 4 years old, you're going to kindergarten this year, right? And parents wanting to push their kids to be great. Go get out, go get on the field right now. You have the ability to do these things, even though you're a year younger or 2 years younger. Go do it, pushing you out. Whereas today, it's, hey, you have the ability to do it now. Think about if we slow the clock down, if we give you a chance to develop even more, think about what it'll look like in a year where you are a little bit older, right? And that's my mindset of it because like I said, there are a couple of and again, in my world of covering wrestling, there are a couple of wrestlers, two of them to be specific, who I believe are held back not just 1 but maybe 2 years, and they're still in high school where even though they should probably be college freshmen at this point, they are now going through the recruitment period as high school juniors. And you see how good they are, and you see how they are right now able to utilize all these rules that are being laid out. NIL, because they live in a state where you can earn NIL money and sponsorships as a high school kid. So they are able to dig into that. They're also able to essentially be ahead on development because they are older than a lot of their competition. To their credit, they are wrestling up as well. They are competing with senior level guys who are grown adults, and they are beating them as well. But they are still high school juniors, in effect. So when I look at this, I'm like, man, for me, I've already seen kids take gray shirt years and go to the Olympic Training Center to train for a year before going to college. And there's nothing against that whatsoever. So for me, that's why I said, okay, that's not really that big of a deal, because I've seen it. I've seen it in other sports. As you said, you've seen it in baseball. You've seen feeder programs happening on these other campuses. So that's why I was just like, okay, that's not really that big of a deal. Where my mind turned, and as you said, you mentioned a number of things that I also agree with, is the reason that people are upset isn't because you have a kid who needed time to develop, that went to a junior college, that inevitably became a star quarterback because he had that time to develop. The reason that people are kind of shaking their head at it is because the kid that is getting the ruling of getting another year is already a star quarterback now. And he was in the spotlight, and he beat arguably one of the most popular teams in college football in Alabama this year. And now he's like, I'm not ready to go. My draft grade is what it is. And I think I deserve an extra opportunity because I needed more time to develop. And I took that time to develop. And he developed into a starting quarterback at a Division I college or university. And the fact that he is now saying, hey, I think that this loophole, as people want to call it, should apply to me. And the judge is saying, okay, yeah, it doesn't just apply to you. It applies for everybody that is in your circle. And even though that circle is, as you said, a pebble in the ocean right now, that ripple effect is going to probably and potentially be something fierce if people say, okay, well, if that's the case where junior college isn't going to count against your clock, then this is something that more and more people are going to start looking into. And again, like I said, and as you mentioned as well, it's 0.0001% of people that this is applying to, but it is going to be magnified as if everyone is doing it, because it's a way to once again skirt the eligibility rules. Now, the last thing that I want to touch on that you spoke about is needing more black and white eligibility rules. And I wholeheartedly agree, because year after year, you are seeing another guy get another medical red shirt. You're seeing, another guy be able to come back after years. I'll dig right into it again in the wrestling side of it. We have Gable Steveson, who hadn't wrestled a college match in about 2 years, I think it was. He won the Olympics the last, not this past year, but he won the Olympics in, what was that, 2022? It was supposed to be the 2020 Olympics. So it was 2021 was when he won the Olympics. It was supposed to be, and after that, I think he hadn't wrestled. Maybe he wrestled that next year in college, but then he's been done since then. So 2021, 2022 is about the last time that he wrestled. And then he comes back this year, right? He had a hiatus of going and being in the WWE because he was signed to an NIL deal, and then eventually signed with them and retired from wrestling altogether. He also was signed to a contract to play in the NFL and played for the Buffalo Bills during their training camp and preseason. He was inevitably cut, and then this year he comes back to college wrestling because he still has a year of eligibility, And it's being said that he was using his Olympic red shirt, is how they are saying he used that time off, is how they're getting around it. So in wrestling, everyone is talking about, well, how the hell are these eligibility rules working if he's allowed to go to the WWE, he's allowed to go play NFL football, and now he comes back to college wrestling after literally being a professional athlete for I don't know how long. He's able to come back to what we consider, or at least was considered, the amateur ranks. So that's where the head scratcher comes in, and why I completely agree with you that we need more black and white rules around eligibility, because every year somebody can submit some sort of waiver or some sort of grievance as to why they deserve another year at college sports, no matter what it is. And I'm sure it happens in women's basketball. I'm sure it happens in, maybe swimming or gymnastics. This isn't just a male dominated thing, even though you see probably more men submit these waivers for these eligibility waivers year after year, because there are more benefits for them on the professional side. So they will probably be submitting these eligibility waivers, but there certainly needs to be more concrete rules and structure around it, because if that happens, we won't see all of these different things. Because you also have different players that don't break any rules and they aren't allowed to play after a transfer. They aren't allowed to take the field for a while, right? So there's certainly a lot of things that are still yet to be determined in this entire thing, but I honestly think that the outrage around it is because it is a star quarterback for a Division I institution, of why these things are getting so much pushback, but also there is going to be a ripple effect in this entire thing. So that those things are yet to be determined, but I feel like you are going to start to see more of these feeder programs in college football very soon, instead of seeing kids reclassify, like Williams, the wide receiver from Alabama, who was 17 and tearing things up, who reclassified 2 years to play for Alabama. You're going to see guys not just reclassifying, but just taking these gray shirt years, going JuCo, maybe getting paid to go JuCo, earn, learn the skills that they want. But that's a double-edged sword, because remember, every single year there's another recruiting class, and there's also another transfer portal class that you're going to have to fight through. So truly figure out where it is you want to go and if the juice is worth the squeeze, essentially.
I think you make a really good point on juice is worth the squeeze on this, because one of the other sort of big components that came to mind for me was the academic opportunities. And I
Mm-hmm.
agree with you entirely on the NCAA sides of things. It's the big running joke is like, it's like, whose line is it anyway? Like, the points are made up and it doesn't really matter. Like,
Yeah.
they just send the sheet in and some people get it and some people don't. And you've got people trying to move closer to home for ailing family, denied.
Mm-hmm.
You've got somebody who wants a ninth year because they hurt their ankle a month ago, accept. Like, I don't, I wish Charlie Baker could give me an honest answer on why that happens on a year-to-year basis. It's crazy to me. And agreed to you. I do think men abuse that a lot more than women in the sports space, because we there's a lot more opportunities for men to dream and hope that they can make a full career or life-changing money in men's professional sports versus women's professional sports. And the I wouldn't say beautiful irony, but sheer irony of that is that those women that, move forward with that degree, have the years that they have, are probably in management and leadership positions by the time this person over here who's got their eighth year of eligibility gets out of their sport.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe they made it, maybe they didn't. I would imagine if a lot of those are medical red shirts, there's not a lot of teams that want to take that risk on somebody who's been in college and has only played for 3 years out of the 5 or 6 or whatever it is. And now they've got to start their career, their life at 27, 28 years old with seemingly no commiserate experience in the business world. And you've got these ladies over here who went through their 4 or their 5 years and have 4 or 5 years of experience in business. And as we all, the stats behind, college athletes and success in the business world is unreal. Like it just the skills that you learn, the soft skills, the hard skills, everything in between. So you look at the trajectory of where those two people are going, and you kind of have to look at yourself and say, okay, which one of these two baskets is the NCAA serving better if they spend all their money and time telling us that they're creating great people because 99% of them aren't going to go play pro? Which ones are you really facilitating appropriately in that space? And I think that if you were to make a harder cut on the NCAA sides of things and say, listen, we'll give you a red shirt, we'll give you a medical red shirt. You can, pick one of those that you want to use at any given point during your career. Maybe you get one, maybe you get the other. Hard cut after the fifth year. If you haven't used those things, you're done. Like you can go play club if you want to, you can do other things. That's done. But we're going to give you these 2 years on the junior college side if you want to take them. And that's an additional 2 years that you can add onto your pipeline. To me, at the very least, as opposed to kids reclassifying in high school and retaking high school courses, I mean, maybe hopefully taking APs or IBs and being able to get credit for it, but you're at least putting them into the college cycle and giving and getting them to get credit. They're getting hours. They're moving towards a
Mhm.
degree. So maybe after those 2 years, you have your associates. At the very least, you have your associates. And then when you go and you do those 4 years at a university, shoot, man, you could have a master's by the time that's all said and done in your normal college cycle of what you're doing, right? You can have that whole experience. You can be working towards something, that really is going to help you on the back end, whether or not you go play sports beyond that. But at least in that structure, like you're always moving towards some sort of career related or academic related goal, as opposed to your point, these kids that are supposed to be college sophomores and they're high school juniors. To me, that's just a disservice to the kids. Like I understand families, the ones that are in unique situations that feel like they want to sort of extend that as much as they can. I do understand that from a fiscal standpoint. I understand that from if you're in that community and everyone's telling you like your kid is the kid or hey, you just do this and it's going to open up so many doors for you. But we got to be able to do it, in my opinion, in a way where you're not right now. I feel like we're sacrificing a lot of these student athletes for the betterment of some obscure goal that somebody might have told a parent about or told a kid about. And at the
Mhm.
very least, if we move everybody into that JuCo cycle, you're at least moving towards something tangible on the academic side. We're at least doing something in that space that's going to give those kids traction. They're going to have a GPA, they're going to have an associate, they're going to have something that can help them move into the next phase of their life. And that to me, if we're really going to put our money where our mouth is in the NCAA and the NJCAA, like you keep telling me you're creating great student athletes, you keep telling me you're creating the next cycle of leaders. Well, you got to give them an opportunity to get those things and to earn those things. And right now, it's this weird deal of like, okay, you have to reclassify on the high school side, so you can't go and gather. You can't soft launch into college. You can't learn what it means to be an adult. You can't get a full course load of grades to work into something. And then on this side, we're going to dangle possible eligibility over your head. So you don't really have a motivation to graduate so much as keep yourself eligible or create opportunities for you to keep playing. Well, once you've done that, shoot, man, you're in class, you're in school for 6, 7 years, and you come out and you barely even had an undergraduate studies degree because at the end of the day, they said, oh, yeah, we're not going to give you your 8th year of eligibility, so you better figure it out. But you've shifted together so many major and minor classes just to like stay in school that I mean I
Mhm.
saw it happen all the time with buddies of mine. I mean the running joke is like you major in eligibility for some of these sports. They just stick you in classes to put you at full time. And who does that help? I mean, what and from a school perspective, I would think, do you not want to put these kids in positions to succeed so that even if whether they do or they don't go on to play their sport, don't you want an alumni base that can donate back to you? Don't you want an alumni base that's proud of the degree that they had and be able to fly back and come to games and spend money at football and basketball and gymnastics and everything in between? Like, is that not good for you as a school? Like, as the NCAA, is it not good for you to be able to argue the statistics of kids graduating and the success metrics and where they're holding positions of influence and power and leadership? Like, if you really want to put your money where your mouth is, that's the kind of stuff you should be creating and thinking about, in my opinion. And obviously, we have the 1% kids who are, I would say, always going to kind of find the loopholes in these things and always going to kind of
Mhm.
have non-traditional pathways through this kind of stuff. But for everybody else, man, just make it easy, make it black and white, make it straightforward, give them opportunities to get degree plans. And it's funny you bring up your experience that, signing into Wilkes. I also was a young kid. I graduated at 17 as well. And I still remember I had an opportunity to go straight to Weatherford College and play at a junior college with my pitching coach, who I had been with since I was like 12 years old, mentor, really felt comfortable with him, was, growing, developing. And then Texas Tech kind of came out of the weeds in the fall of my senior year. And I remember one of the biggest reasons why I chose Texas Tech was this idea of like, well, I'm eating into my opportunities at a 4 year. Like, why not go and roll the dice at this 4 year
Mm-hmm.
where you've got the big football program and you can have that whole experience and they have all the gear and whatnot. Like, what I don't want to potentially trade a year or two of that if this works out. And then obviously for me, it didn't. And I ended up going, 4 schools in 3.5 years. I ended up back at Weatherford College the next year because there wasn't a transfer portal when I was going to school. And I kind of look back and think, man, if I would have known that going to Weatherford would not have harmed my ability to still have that college experience that I think so many kids are primed to want to have, because I mean, God, it looks good on TV, no doubt about it. And like all your buddies go and it's fun and I mean, shoot, man. And like I grew up in Texas, like how do you not want to go to the school with a big football program? Like
Oh yeah.
I'm planning my day today around the Texas football game for the semifinal. Like I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, no doubt about it. But if I would have known that I could have had that extra year and said, hey, you can go to Weatherford, you can have that experience, and you're not going to carve into those opportunities that you really have for yourself as a goal while still, kind of still having a college experience without having to really fully commit, I would have been at Weatherford, no doubt. And I fully believe that my overall college experience would have been different. Do I regret doing what I did? No. Part of my life experience. It's part of what got us here. Like, all good. But if I would have gone back and you would have given me those two options and told me, hey, if you go to Weatherford, you're still gonna have those full 4 years wherever you end up after a year or two, no question. I'm not sitting in that coach's office at Weatherford College, literally crying in a chair, telling him that I'm decommitting to Weatherford to go to Texas Tech, because I don't have to have sort of that emotional moment. I can do all of it. I can do both of those things. And so that's to your point. I think I definitely probably think about it from that standpoint too. I bring in sort of a personal anecdote on that
Mm-hmm.
on that side. Um, and so it's hard for me to, I don't know. I like it. I like the idea of this. I like the idea of it.
Yeah.
Someone's going to screw it up along the way. I don't know what's going to happen. They're going to
Yes.
make it to where you can be like 12 years of eligibility. So that's going to stink. But in its form, if you ask the general public how would this make sense and they gave you the answer, I like that idea. That's cool to me.
Yeah, and I guess can at this point you can kind of consider us to be sports cynics in that regard, right? Because we've seen all of these new things come to fruition of NIL and now, this JuCo rule that only affects a very small portion of athletes in college. And we're just like, something's gonna go wrong. Something's going to be messed up with this entire thing, right? Like this is a good thing that happened to Diego Pavia because he gets another year to develop and maybe improve his future of whatever it is in football, or he doesn't, right? It's a 50-50 shot. Who knows what's going to happen? But we certainly know that somebody is going to use this precedent to have things be messed up, because we're already seeing it with next year having rev share. Because now, even though rev share is going to be some great thing for the 5-star quarterback or the 5-star athlete that's coming in, it's a horrible thing for walk-ons because there are none anymore. It's a horrible thing for a kid that wants to have his go to his dream school, but probably can't now because there's 105 football players that need to be paid, or there's 30 wrestlers that you want to have on full scholarship, right? Like, and not for nothing, if you're an athlete in one of these Olympic sports, you might not even have a collegiate career anymore because the school you want to go to may pull the rug out from underneath that, right? So that's what, when we look at all of these different things that we've looked at and discussed on this show, it's always the thing for me is like how we go deeper and deeper to the dark side of this is a really great thing, but somebody's going to mess it up. Somebody's going to screw this up somewhere along the way. And the thing for me as well is that athletes staying in college for their full 4 years, no matter what sport it is, let's call it football, is such a rarity that when kids are fighting for extra eligibility, it's considered a horrible thing, that people are mad at that, right? Like, think about it. There for so long, what is it? Who was it? Kentucky or whoever one of these basketball schools were, UConn. For so long, it was, one and done. Kid's going to Duke. He'll be at Duke for a year. He's on to the NBA. NIL is keeping these kids around a little bit longer, which I think is great, but it's obviously a double-edged sword of they're not getting the financial literacy. They're not getting the true background of what it is to handle that much money at such a young age. So that's the other side of the coin in that regard. In football, I always go back to a post that I saw where somebody is like, it was this year where somebody talked about how Bo Nix and Jake Herbert played against each other in college, and how Jake Herbert has been in the NFL for 4, almost 5 years, and how Bo Nix is a rookie this season. And it's just like, so which one is bad? Is it bad that Herbert didn't fully take advantage of the years that he had in college, or is it bad that Bo Nix did? Right? Like, where are we? What is your complaint? Are you trying to say, oh, Bo Nix is old, or are you trying to say that Jake Herbert is not? He's still young in his career. Where are we at on this scale? I'm guessing it's, oh, Bo Nix is old and he's an old rookie. And the same thing can be said for Michael Penix in Atlanta, which they try to say, right? Oh, he had surgeries, he had season ending injuries, he's 24, he's older. But then in the same regard, if he comes out of college before he's ready to go to the NFL and he stinks up the joint, it's, man, he still needs to develop. Man, he came out too soon. So we have to pick and choose here, and the fan base will never pick and choose. You're always going to have fans that are like, man, he he's horrible. He's a horrible quarterback. When in actuality, he probably just needs a couple more a year or two to develop. And that's what Pavia is doing. He needs a year to develop because he didn't get the same high level coaching during his junior college years that he's getting now at Vanderbilt. And I mean, who would be surprised if tomorrow, or if right now while we're recording this, Pavia is entering the transfer portal? We just saw it with Carson Beck yesterday, where he was like, I'm going to the NFL. Oh, my draft grade probably isn't what I want it to be. I'm coming back to college and I'm going into the transfer portal, right? Pavia gets another shot at college football. Who's to say that he doesn't transfer to a bigger program? I'm sure that there are calls being made to his agent right now with NIL money on the table to get him away from Vanderbilt. So, as I said, there's a double-edged sword that comes with each one of these things, and I love how you and I have gone back and forth on them with so many different topics. But the underlying thing is always, as good as this is or as bad as this is, it can be worse. Somebody's going to screw this up. The other shoe is going to drop. And that's why like I said, I consider us to be, former athletes who have now turned into sports cynics when it comes to all of these different things, because we look at them through a completely different lens, whether it be personal or professional. It just has a different kind of ring to it when you hear it. And I like I said, I love the discussion that we've had, because you love this idea. I love it to a certain point where I think that, I am straight to somebody's going to screw this up. I am straight to that point. So, I like I said, I want this to work out for athletes. I always want things to work out for athletes, because for so long it has worked out for the NCAA. It has worked out for the school administrations. It has worked out for the coaches who can leave and go wherever the hell they want at the drop of a hat. It rarely works for the athletes. The athletes are always left holding the bag. So I would love to see something truly work out well for the athletes. In this regard, it is for Pavia, who probably needs that time to develop before going off to the NBA, or excuse me, to the NFL. But as we said, somebody is going to screw it up. With that, I leave the final thoughts to you, Reed, to kind of wrap things up.
Yeah, well, I mean, this to me is one of the more fun conversations that we get to have on this. So many times I feel like we talk about things and it's just kind of a bummer. And this at the very least is
Yeah.
something that like I think there is potential here for to have some really interesting developments. The thing that I'll kind of I think cap my thoughts off on is in the NCAA, I think we have kind of a petri dish example, if you will, of athletes that start the process later on a consistent basis. A la if you were to go to junior college for 2 years, you'd feasibly be starting your 4 year career as a 20-year-old, 21-year-old, depending on when you graduate. We see that a little bit on college hockey, Division I men's hockey specifically. For years now, this has changed. So again, another change, but for years, guys would go and they would play juniors. They would potentially have, professional contracts signed and they would go play in different leagues. And many of those kids are being picked up at 20, 21, 22 years old because they've done
Mhm.
their couple of years in juniors. They've tried, it didn't work out. The NCAA, according to their own statistics, for single class graduation success rate, ice hockey is number one across all men's sports at 96%. So what that tells me is that giving kids more time to develop and figure out who they are and potentially even learn to understand the value of what they're getting out of a college experience and a college degree, statistically speaking, seems to do pretty good on a lot of these things. And so if there's concern about people delaying or not graduating or that's always going to be a concern across the board, but we've seen in our little baby example where the NCAA has allowed it that if you give kids more time to develop and figure out who they are and figure out what they want and build towards a goal, they're responding to it. They're showing you that they want to be there. 96% graduation success rate is unbelievable. And I love hockey. It's my favorite sport to watch. They get made fun of all the time for being just like a bunch of meatheads and just like being on the ice and not doing. And you're looking at this, and they're doing it at places like Harvard and Dartmouth, and that to me showcases the potential of what something like this can do. To your point, if our cynic hat doesn't go on, and we assume all the ways that it could be taken advantage of. So for now, until we have that happen, I'm choosing to believe that this could be a really, really good addition and opportunity for kids that need a bit more time to grow up or to save a little bit of money or just kind of slow roll this whole thing. I'm a fan.
Yeah. My final thought is that there will always be, let me back up. There will always be loopholes for revenue generation. That is my final thought. And it probably goes along with my, follow the money type of mentality when it comes to everything that is going on with mainstream NCAA sports. But it's 9 times out of 10, it is correct. And that's not a pat on my own back. It is when you truly look at how these things are working, when there is a chance for revenue growth and revenue generation, there's always going to be a loophole from the powers that be. And that's where I stand on it. And until there's an equal amount of power to go around, which there never will be, because power imbalance is what keeps the structures moving forward. It's never going to be what we want it, but you know, we're going to continue to support our tribal attributes of just wanting our teams to be good. We're certainly going to tune in for the games and for the teams that we love, and things like this are going to continue to happen. So, as I said, I hope that my cynic side is incorrect and that things do not go wrong, but I also hope that things always go right when it comes to the athlete. So, those are my final thoughts. And I hope that everyone enjoyed today's conversation. I know I certainly did. There are a number of things that we are going to discuss here in the new year when it comes to topics kind of like this. Um, but no, as always, Reed, I always enjoy your perspective. I always enjoy hearing your thoughts on things, and I enjoy just getting to chop it up with you whenever we get a chance to come on here. So I appreciate your thoughts and appreciate your time. And I appreciate everybody who's been listening. Make sure you like, subscribe, do all those fun YouTube things that you're supposed to do so you don't miss any of our content here on the Athletes to Athletes podcast.